Hello, my name is Tomas O'Dwyer, and this is an interview with the very experienced, very knowledgeable Taylor Kimball. Taylor is a good friend of mine and is an expert search engine optimization specialist, or SEO, for those people in the lingo that are in the space. Um, Taylor has been literally everywhere in terms of the market as a whole, specializing, and correct me if I'm wrong, in on page optimization.
Yeah.
And I suppose the reason I'm having you on today, Taylor, is you have a specific skill set when it comes to leveraging artificial intelligence to optimize websites to basically make the most of the platform that is Google. So I'd really like to take the time today and do a big deep dive, and hopefully it's educational for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully so.
Starting off, do you want to just give a bit of an intro about yourself and your elevator pitch, so to speak, if you will?
Sure. Yeah. So, as you said, my main interest in SEO is on-page content-based. My background is I was a content manager previously and a client manager for Kyle Roof's agency, High Voltage SEO. Now I run my own small agency. I do consulting, and then I have my own projects as well. So for me, I like the technical side of SEO, but I'm also always curious to see like how can we streamline the process, right? Especially if you want to grow a portfolio of sites or you have a large client base, what can we do to cut down on, say, like admin drag, which is like spending time kind of on tasks that don't really move the needle, but also how can we save time, save costs, and just make the whole process streamlined, right? And I think AI in all different assets or aspects, such as content tools, even tools that may not be directly AI, but like things like Pop or Surfer. How can we really use data to make our SEO effective and not just guess, right? And so that's kind of my avenue of exploration. I wouldn't say that I'm a specialist in one thing or another. What I really enjoy is looking kind of at the high level overview, seeing how search engines work, seeing what works in terms of getting sites ranking, and also taking a long term view of saying like, okay, this is where I think it's going. So how can we do good SEO that's relevant, say in like not just 6 months, but in 2 years, right? So AI is all the rage. And there's a lot of hype around it, both good and bad, and some justified, some not justified. Um, and I think, yeah, it's good to use the tool where it matters, but to see that there are limitations. And if you are going to use it, how can we use it in a safe manner that isn't going to get your site or client site hit, 6 months from now when Google starts or maybe starts going after AI content.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anytime I'm talking to my clients, what I'm always saying is, the nice thing about Google is that the proof is always in the pudding. There is that saying, success leaves footprints. And, you leveraging tools like that, like Pop, for anybody who's
Mm.
unfamiliar with it, or Surf for SEO, it really allows you to reverse engineer success. Um, but I would definitely be like minded with you in terms of that. Ultimately, and I suppose this is the whole reason why I want to start this video series. SEO is a long term play. Um, and to be honest, it's the way I view it, it's nearly organic online brand building
Yep.
through the medium that is Google. And with that, the digital landscape as a whole is changing big time. So I suppose this is where I think specialists like myself or yourself come in, where we can't be thinking about where Google is today. We need to already be thinking where, could Google be heading 6 months, 12 months, 24 months from now, 36 months from now. And on a meta level, that requires a lot more skill sets than I think a lot of people maybe are aware of. Where they
Mm.
might have read a blog post by like Neil Patel from like 2016 on how to do keyword research. But again, today, for anybody listening, we're going to be taking a big deep dive into the nuances, I suppose, of how a Google's algorithm works, what way it's going, and ideally provide some insights for anybody that's intimidated by the concept of AI, because I definitely hear it being used a lot. We can talk about lexical search engines, semantic search engines, and so on. But for anybody listening, those terms will be explained. But I might take it back first. How you got into the space in the first place, the whole entrepreneurial journey. It's a cliche question, but I suppose it's always an interesting one. I obviously met you in Thailand, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you've got some. It's an interesting roadmap. So I'd love to hear how you got into it.
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit strange, especially being in Thailand where you're surrounded by people who like call themselves entrepreneurs, or like that's the mindset, like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, or I have friends who went to school for entrepreneurship, like, oh, you got a degree. I'm still not comfortable with that term, right? I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. I've never thought about like, oh, I want to do entrepreneurship, but the truth is, I'm not a very good employee. Like I'm not very employable in the long term because if I start working somewhere, I typically want to make a lot of changes, and I get bored really easy. So I think with entrepreneurship, it's kind of like I ended up defaulting there because I just wasn't great at other things. Now I'm exceptional at what I do, but if you just tell me, okay, do the same thing every day, I get extremely bored. So almost in every industry that I've been in, and I've worked through a lot of different ones, I typically start working for someone, working at an agency. I used to be a chef, so working at a restaurant, and then I get my skill set to the point where people approach me for side work or consulting, or I used to be a private chef. And then it kind of caveats from there, right? And then it builds on that. So I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I still don't. Like when someone says, "Oh, you're into entrepreneurship," I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." Um, but yeah, now I'm in Chiang Mai and surrounded by a much stronger community of people who do embrace that term, who are actively building their business, and so that's been a big mindset shift for me. Whereas before, my focus throughout my 20s was just traveling around the world. So I really didn't think like, oh, I should build a business. All I was focused on was how can I keep traveling, and going to different countries and making money. And that was working remotely. So I was a freelance editor, and that just sort of parlayed eventually into meeting Kyle Roof, and we became good friends. And then a content management job opened up at High Voltage, and it was kind of a natural progression from one to the other. So I was there, and yeah, that kind of got me into SEO. I met Matt Diggity, Will Tribe, a number of SEOs here in Chiang Mai, and just being in that community slowly pushed me into learning more about it. And yeah, and now that was more than 2 years ago, and here we are today. So I would say like a lot of it is accidental, right? Like many people move to Chiang Mai to be in the SEO community. I moved here because I had been here in 2014 and loved it, and in 2018 I was in South America and it was getting cold for winter, so I just like, fuck, I'll go back to Chiang Mai, and that was that. Yeah, so like for years I knew SEO was here and I didn't care about it. And it's ironic now that SEO is like, my career and my passion. So I think that kind of sums it up. I didn't really I don't have a clear entrepreneurial journey. It's sort of just something like I'm stumbling forward. But I'm okay with it that way, right? Like there's not a pressure for me to be like, I have to be this, successful entrepreneur. I'm just someone who likes to have freedom. And eventually at a certain point, you realize the only way you really get that is working for yourself, in one way or another, or finding a skill set that allows you to have clients where you still kind of work for someone in a sense, but you really dictate your work schedule, your value, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no. In terms of that, it really is about dissociating the value you're providing from the input, and
Yeah.
it's funny because my mom used to be a teacher, and she would always be saying, education is not a heavy burden. But when I went into this field in the first place, it was genuinely the case. Like, it's so cliche that it's cringy, but like, learners are earners. I remember a very good friend of mine, Robin Schuckman, when I first got into the space, he was working crazy hours, but he was still allocating, 3, 4 hours a day to upskilling on top of his work. And,
Mm.
it
Mm.
paid off dividends. But you're touching on something I suppose that beautifully segments into what we're talking about here with AI in general. And you said that you're not great at one specific task,
Yeah.
and you like to combine different skill sets, and maybe you can see where I'm going with this, in different new and unique ways. And I
Mm.
suppose that is where AI can come in. I'm reading a lot of books on it at the moment. One of them being Prediction Machines here. Good
Mm-hmm.
book, I'd recommend it. And about the impact of AI on business and society and economics and so on. And I suppose what we're really saying here, one of the takeaways is AI is not going to take full jobs. It's not how it works. a doctor doesn't just do one thing. It
Sure.
combines them in new, unique ways. If you look at accountants, when accounting software when accounting software came out, people were like, "Oh, all accountants are going to be gone." And needless to say, spoiler alert, they're still here. Their
Yeah.
jobs have just adjusted, and the whole premise being that basically, with the advent of this software, which was just glorified arithmetic, um, basically people found ways of automating arithmetic. And originally, accountancy used to be literally adding things up. Now they moved to higher level tasks. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
like you to deep dive into your, I suppose, definition of AI and so on. But one thing I'd like to premise this with is where computers commoditized and democratized arithmetic, AI is doing the same thing for predictions. And
Yeah.
that's really what it is. And all of a sudden, the ability to make high quality decisions based on predictions is what's becoming super cheap. And that's really what we need to realize. And it's tasks in our job that are dependent on guessing missing information in
Mm-hmm.
certain scenarios. That's where AI is going to step in. Um, and as of right now, it's best off suited for specific tasks. And it's going to be for us humans to combine those different tasks, but at a much higher level. But that's just
Yeah.
what I wanted to bring in, because I think it actually really nicely ties into your whole stance on combining different things.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree. No, we can cut that out in post.
I don't know.
We'll find out.
Getting used to this software.
Yeah. So no, I agree. Right. Now, like when when GPT-3 came out and we had tools like Jasper, on the market, a lot of writers, and you see it now also, I think with the, like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, there's a lot of uproar in different communities when a tool comes out that they see as a disruptor, and it rightfully so, because I do think in some sense it levels the playing field, but it also shakes out people who only can produce mediocre quality content. So if you have someone, and this isn't to say that like they're gone, but if you are creating poor quality content and a tool like Jasper comes out, and can do the same quality job for much cheaper, yeah, it's a threat to your livelihood.
Mm,
But if you're an entrepreneur, then this tool is a boon because it's like, wait, I can train someone who might be a non-native speaker, right? Maybe they're a great reader. They're actually a good editor. They understand the flow of language, but when they write, it just seems a little bit off. A tool like Jasper or now Chat, um, that's great
mm.
at basically allowing them to produce higher quality content, and you as the entrepreneur or business owner getting the advantage of that. You can produce it faster, you can get it much cheaper. On the flip side, I think a tool like DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, there's a lot of people out there who are visual thinkers. They
Mm-hmm.
have amazing ideas, but they've never learned to paint, right? They just don't have the time. They don't have the means to do so. But if they can think in images and they can express that to AI, then they can actually create those images. And I like the idea of a level playing field in many senses where, you know, what you do is not linked necessarily to a specific output. I'm not a specialist in this one thing, right? There is the need for that. So there's limitations on AI. And AI isn't painting masterpieces, but if someone wants to explore, creating content or explore creating AI-based images off of things that they imagine, I think more power to you. So those tools are there, and they are tools in our toolbox. But I think it's common, to feel threatened by any new technology. And I think that's like just a pattern across human history, right? Imagine that you sold horses for cart and buggy, and then cars were being sold. Like, oh man, that's the end for you, or so you think. But there's always ways to pivot
Yeah.
and adjust, right? So even people who are like, oh, this AI tool is going to put me out of business because I'm a content writer. It's like, well, why don't you figure out a way to incorporate that?
Yeah.
Maybe it can write your first draft, and then you can spruce it up and you can get things going much faster. Maybe you should consider opening your own agency. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like the tools. I think they're great, and I think it's as you said, right? They're there to be combined in different ways. What's the intersection between one skill set or one interest in another, and how
Yeah.
can you put that together in fascinating combinations?
Yeah, 100%. I'd back that. And for anybody listening who's unfamiliar with the tools that we just described, again, Jasper is a copywriting assisting tool uh, based on software that, again, you can clarify the technicalities, Taylor, called GPT-3 effectively,
Correct.
which we'll dive into how that actually works, what you're actually looking at, how AI works as a whole, which should be interesting. But basically, it's taken the world kind of by storm. It's built using the same technology as ChatGPT, but it's gone a long way in terms of accelerating copywriters' workflows. However, as we'll discuss, in the eyes of Google, it's definitely not to be taken at face value and should be improved.
Mm.
But piggybacking off what you said there, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and based on my own initial impression, we are literally looking at, to be frank, this second coming of the printing press. And that might sound melodramatic, but I mean, we're literally looking at a means of accelerating the development of concepts. It's effectively a
Sure.
digital renaissance. And that might make me
Yeah.
sound like I'm being a complete devout futurist. But I mean, what we're looking at here is what may have taken you a week of planning is all of a sudden done in 10 seconds or 30 seconds. And
For
that's
sure.
that's not a it's not a case of, oh my god, there's going to be no ideas. No, this supercharges us. This doesn't replace us. This allows us to just make better decisions because we're pulling in more data, and all AI is doing is it's machine learning is effectively artificially created data based on existing data. It's glorified statistics. But I might ask you to explain. I might ask you to explain, please don't complain, how AI works in layman's terms for anybody that hears the buzz about it on, TikTok, Instagram Reels, but doesn't actually know what it involves.
Mm. Sure. So I think that it's important to distinguish between like when we say something like artificial intelligence, uh, it's a broad scope, right? So you have different types of machine learning, but essentially, and we'll focus mostly on like topics when we go deep into chat, GPT-3 based tools. But for the most part, it's a feedback loop where you train a language model or a learning model on inputs. So that could be maybe the goal you want is for the AI to write a children's fairy tale, right? So what you can do is you can feed the AI text documents that are full of classic fairy tales. Now, you could do that from all over the world. You could do it in multiple languages. But let's say we want an English output. So we'd feed it like Aesop's Fables, Grimm's Fables. It could have text versions of the dialogue from Disney movies. They are renditions of fairy tales. And basically, it's going to be reading those, learning from them, and then it attempts to output. You can give it a command, like write me a fairy tale about A, B, and C. Now, in this example, it's only been trained on fairy tales, so it would understand what is a fairy tale. It already has that in its database. It would read through all of the patterns. It's been learning the patterns of structure. Okay, so a fairy tale typically follows, this A, B, C. If you're familiar with like Joseph Campbell, it's kind of the hero's journey, right? Oh, there's the happy life, then something happens, and then the hero, he faces conflict, he doesn't want to go, then he meets someone and they take him on the journey. So patterns of stories and patterns are common in life, right? And the AI is just great at detecting this. And typically it's better than humans because we actually get wrapped up in the story itself. We get wrapped up in the process. And that could be seen in even like trading, right? So financial trading has been dominated by AI tools for a long time.
Yeah,
And highly emotional field, just like
yeah,
stories are
exactly. It's
highly
the
emotional.
emotions that are skewing it. Yeah,
Right. So AI is logic based, right? And it makes decisions just based on logic and patterns that it perceives. So I could read, 100 fairy tales, and then I will have an emotional and a logical understanding of the pattern, right? And you have many famous writers who actually do something like that. They'll have a sketch of, say, okay, here's the journey of stories, but the AI already has that intuitively because it's read all of it, and then it can follow the output, follow the pattern, and create an output for that story. It would create characters, scenarios, the plot twists, all of that. And that's essentially how AI works. Now, if it had only been trained on, say, children's stories, and I said, write me a science fiction story, it wouldn't have a context for what that is, right? It wouldn't know what is science and what is science fiction. There's been no training around that subject. So AI at this point isn't really creating new stories or new data that it hasn't learned about before. So that's a big limitation, even in tools like Chat and Jasper. Anything that it hasn't seen, it can't create something new. But when you can feed AI on massive scales, so this is something like OpenAI has done and Google's Lambda as well, right? They're getting trained on tons of different data sets from, say, like Wikipedia entries, common text, mathematics, science, and you can just train the AI either A, in a general way, or B, in hyper-specific ways, and then get the output you're looking for. So I think in our field, or in the digital marketing field, we look at tools like Chat to be, wow, this is super interesting, super exciting. It's going to end the world for poor quality content writers, and I think it's okay. But if you look at something like what is it DeepMind or AlphaGo, those are
DeepMind.
much more interesting
Yeah,
AI learning experiments where you're teaching AI to play hyper complex games, right? In this case, Go, and there's an awesome documentary about it, and I think it's called Go or Alpha versus Man, something like this, where basically it documents the process of a software development firm building an AI to play the game Go, which is kind of
yeah,
I, Asian version of chess, but hyper complex, much
yeah.
more,
It's like one of the most
and against
complex games.
grandmasters. Right. And then the other one
Yeah,
is there's an amazing video out there about AI playing StarCraft, right? StarCraft requires so much resource management. It's very complex. Every game is kind of different, but those AI were trained. They watched numerous games, right? They watched the games and then they played thousands of iterations of those games again and again and again until they find the patterns and then they become exceptional at it. So while content is interesting, it's a much more simple version than
yeah,
AI who's been trained for like game prediction that happens in real time. So that's another
yeah,
distinction to make. Like, what is the AI who's adjusting in real time to specific scenarios, and what is AI who is essentially not a content spinner, but it's not learning in the moment of your interaction
yeah,
with it.
yeah. This just happens to be a friendly user interface for the layman that's not interested in all this nerd
Correct.
stuff. Yeah, I was actually watching because there's a few things I wanted to touch on there. I was watching a really good interview with Demis Demis Hassabis. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Who's the founder of DeepMind with Lex
Mm.
Friedman, and he actually talks a lot about that and the whole reason why they use games. For anybody listening to this, they might be, well, that's a stupid use of artificial intelligence. But the whole point being was a game. All it's you're basically introducing rule sets and it's a simulation of real life, but you can kind of control the
Correct.
parameters. So Demis Hassabis's whole stance was you could get to a stage if you think of Sims, for example, you can like add more and more variables and actually train up a computer to learn how to interact in real life within a controlled environment before quote
Yeah.
unquote unleashing it. Um, and to be honest, for any of the cynics, I mean, I think I'm going to butcher this now, but they what was it? They were looking at ways of they basically started introducing deep find or not deep mind, deep fold, I believe it's called. It's a kind of
Mm.
same company, and they were looking at ways they introduced biology, and they were looking at ways of basically mapping out how proteins in your body can attach to each other. And they were saying what would usually take a PhD student their entire career basically within the PhD, they'd basically use AI in combination with experimental data to start churning out these new discoveries in biology like every few minutes. And they basically did more over a Christmas holiday than people had done in years and years before that. Um,
Yeah.
and that's just to give an idea, I suppose, of the correlations between what might seem trivial on a simulated sense can have real world implications. Um, but piggybacking off that, Taylor, again, we'll delve into the SEO stuff, but I want to nerd out about where you think things are going for a moment first. We're talking because this, I think, is most people's objection with or contradiction against AI, where they're like, but it doesn't create any new content. It's all
Mm.
remixing existing content.
Mm.
What is your personal stance on, I suppose, the way Demis, again, founder of DeepMind, expresses? He used the term interpolation versus extrapolation. So
Yeah.
interpolation is obviously, remixing existing content, kind of like what we see with ChatGPT. But again, most people's stances are, oh yeah, but it can't create any original ideas. I actually heard a video of Neil deGrasse Tyson getting very angry, saying, "Oh, but they'll never create new ideas." But then I've heard Demis Hassabis saying the exact opposite. He's like, "Well, that's actually exactly what we're working towards, um, where we're kind of projecting into the future and coming up with new stuff people haven't thought of." What are your thoughts, kind
Yeah.
of, in terms of the direction of this and maybe its impact on society as a whole, as
Sure.
existential as it
So
is?
I mean, this is getting more on the meta level of like what is a new
Yes,
idea.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
But I do enjoy that because this is where my fascination is with AI tools or these kind of things, or like learning, right? How do humans learn, right? We don't really exist in a vacuum. We don't exist in a bubble. So to think that we come up with quote unquote original ideas, I think that's a fallacy for our ego, right? Oh, have you ever had an original thought? I don't know, right? Because I can't remove all the inputs and influences I've ever had. We are much more automated machines than I think we like to acknowledge as individuals, right? We typically have routines, we have ways of thinking. Our brain tends to follow the same neural pathways that we build over time, whether that's in what we like, we don't like, how we seek pleasure, how we find rewards. We are not that different than now I might get reamed for this, but we're not that different than a machine that has learned a specific set of data, right? And the difference is, if let's say I want to get into a new field, I don't know anything about medical science, right? So this is an
Yeah,
example that you mentioned. I know nothing
biomedical.
about it.
Yeah,
If I decide to get into that field, what will I do? Well, I might watch some YouTube videos. I'll get a list of like the curriculums from schools. I'll read those books, but I'm subject to being tired. I'm subject to forgetfulness. I'm going to learn something. I'll highlight it. I'll take notes. Like humans are not typically efficient learners. We don't really learn how to learn at a young age. So we'll forget things. We'll make mistakes. We'll be tired. Maybe we gloss over something that's hyper important, but we don't perceive it as important, so we don't remember it. AI doesn't have this problem, right? It doesn't get sleepy. It doesn't get tired. It just keeps learning, right? So whereas I can maybe study realistically 4 or 5 hours a day, and I think that's really pushing it to say like, oh, humans can study 4 hours a day and really remember what they retain. You can run that AI simulation and it can get through all of the texts. It's going to remember everything, in the sense that it remembers. And then the real question, is at a higher level, like what are we discovering? We're rarely discovering something new. Typically what's happening is we are familiar with multiple ideas, multiple concepts, and then we're combining them in new ways. And I think that's where people sort of, can get angry, like, oh, AI can't discover something new. It's like, but that doesn't often happen. Often is
yeah,
taking two things that seem dissimilar and realizing that, oh, there's an intersection here. Um, as a slight tangent, there's a very prolific sociologist, and I don't remember his last name. He's super famous for building what's known as the Zettelkasten, and Lumen is his last name. I believe he was German, or he was European. Essentially, what he did is he had a note-taking system where he'd read, he'd study, he'd write notes down, he'd write his ideas down, and he did that over the course of years. And he's one of the most prolific academics of all time. And the reason he was so prolific, and he basically said, like, my Zettelkasten is my external brain, right? So whereas before he had to create this external brain, where in his opinion, these are great. Our brains are great for coming up with ideas, not retaining information. So, you meet someone at the party and you can't remember their name, even though you spent 20 minutes talking to them. But you can, come up with scenarios about that person. Oh, we'd be great friends. We'd go here, so on and so forth. I think that this is really like the middle ground of AI is it doesn't forget. It learns everything. And it's much easier for it to find, an intersection where one might seem to not exist. And I think that's really where ideas come from. It's like, okay, let's look at A, B, and C, and we think that equals E. But most of the time, ideas are looking at, like X and A don't seem like they're related, but actually they are, and they create this new thing that we didn't have before. So yeah, I think AI can be amazing in that aspect, and it can be integrated really well with creative work. For example, like let's say I'm running ads. Let's say I'm helping. I'm hired to do the creative ads for a company. I don't have to just guess which ads perform the best, or which ads the company ran before that performed the best. I can use tools from Facebook. I can use AI-driven tools to see, like, okay, hey, what have been the best performing ads from my company and similar companies, and it'll give me that data. And then I can look and say, okay, which ads are actually getting click-through rates, and I can adjust my creative copy accordingly. Even with copywriting, right? I can see, okay, hey, what do all of the best performing ads have in common? Common? What's their flow? What's the pacing? What's the word count? And the AI can give me that outline, those sort of rules that I can then creatively influence and build. So I disagree with the idea that it's not doing something original. Now, obviously, there is limitations in the sense of, like, if the AI knows nothing about the subject, it really won't be able to do an output. But again, like, I don't know anything about biology, so I
Yeah,
also
what a
can't create a
human. Yeah,
meaningful output,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Like, I can't. There's nothing I can come up with in biology. Now, I can say
yeah.
some things, but, like, if you ask me anything beyond
You're
a
probably
legit
talking shit.
question, I know nothing. Yeah, I know nothing, and I wouldn't even be able
Yeah,
to. I would be like the AI. I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know anything about
exact
this. I've
same.
never,
Yeah,
I've never had an input that
yeah,
matters, right?
yeah,
So yeah, that's
yeah.
my view on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's an amazing tool. And it's going to as you said, it's going to accelerate the process of creativity for people who learn how to work with it, business owners, businessmen. Yeah, I
Or
do
women.
think it's a revolution uh, across the board, and in many ways, I think it's a great one. Right? Imagine being able
Hmm.
to get people off of meaningless and sort of like trivial tasks, and allowing AI to you know
Do the
automate
heavy
that, and then
lifting. Yeah,
freeing up, you know, individuals around the world for something creative. Now, not everyone wants that, right? I realize this, but that is a possibility for a lot of us. So,
nice. Yeah, I mean, it ultimately will move forward, but with regards to the whole innovation thing, I mean, ultimately, my stance on all these things are ultimately innovation is just remixing existing inputs. Like you basically take a range of inputs, you mix them up in different ways, you spit out a new output, and it's considered original. Um,
yeah.
they say the whole steal like an artist thing. If you, for example, are a musician and you copy just the Beatles, you'll be known as a wannabe version of the Beatles. But if you look at who the Beatles' inspirations were, you take their inputs, you mix them up, and you add a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You come, add your own spin to it. People will be like, "Oh my god, he's original. He's a pioneer in his area." And
Mm,
that's
mm,
ultimately, I suppose, the question is, what is originality?
mm.
But
Uh, Go ahead.
go on, I insist.
I highly anyone who gets upset at the idea that, like, oh, original ideas don't exist. No, I'm not saying that they don't for sure, and discoveries do exist, but discoveries are typically made by someone who's an expert in their field and knows where to look. Right? They know how to combine things. I highly recommend a video series called "Everything Is a Remix." I think it's on Vimeo. It might be on YouTube. I think it's 4 or 5 parts, but it gets into this exact concept, right? It looks at
Hmm.
musicians, movie makers. It gets a lot into Tarantino, who's an
Okay.
acclaimed director, right? And
Yeah.
we think his films are so unique, so original. And then this video series actually breaks down, like, Tarantino has clear, like, he takes exact shots, exact setups, like, story aspects from films he loved and puts them in his film. And the only issue is we don't have the reference, right? We are not.
Yeah.
Now, some of us, someone watching maybe, but, like, I'm not a film buff, so I don't have the reference point to see that he's making a reference to this film, right? Tarantino does. If I was playing music, I may have a musical background that you don't, so I may, use a riff, use a bass line, even take a beat from one of my favorite producers, and you think it's original. But if someone had the background that I had, they'd be like, oh, he's pulling that from this person. So
Hmm.
yeah, everything is a remix. Fantastic video series,
Yeah.
really eye opening in the way we create, new ideas and new concepts.
Yeah. And last thing before we move on, I suppose for any doubters of that kind of argument or train of thought, I mean, if you just look at the evolution of music, as you kind of said, if you look at there's a great thing on Netflix, I think it was the evolution of hip hop. It
Mm,
was, if you look at just what hip hop looked back 30 years ago, 40 years, the original versus where we are now, or even the evolution of rock, things like that. It's yeah, it's inevitable, and everyone was just remixing what inputs they had at the time. But delving back into actionable um, advice and steps on this, how do you see all this? Like, how can, as a business owner, a digital marketer specifically, how can we leverage AI? And I want to touch on, I suppose, for anyone that's wants to know the nitty gritty, natural language processing or NLP, and where does
Mhm.
that kind of fit into things? Because ultimately, these are kind of terms that I would like people to become familiar with as time goes on, just so we know the basics. So, what is natural language processing, and why is it relevant for digital marketers? And what are some use cases that we see, for example, with GPT-3 and soon GPT-4 and so on? And what are its pros and
Sure.
cons?
Yeah. So let's start with the broader one first, which you said, like, we're in digital marketing. How can we use AI tools? And I think a lot of it is just, as I'd mentioned before, finding things that maybe you're spending a lot of time on, that you can automate, right? So, and I think we have a lot of AI already that we don't even acknowledge as AI, because we think, I think the conception of AI is like a robot having, like people are blown away by Chat GPT-3, and rightly so. But even you could say something like spam filters, right? How does the algorithm know when an email comes to you that this is spam and actually not, an email you should receive? Now, it does make mistakes. And nothing's perfect. But even that's a model of AI, right? It's getting an email, it's looking at your whether does it pass checks A, B, and C? Okay, it can go to your email inbox. Oh, it doesn't, so it's spam, and here we go. So I think AI is already prevalent in our lives. We just tend not to think about it. So less than searching out what are the AI tools I should use. I think it's more like looking at where am I spending the majority of my time on tasks that maybe don't move the needle but are necessary? And I like to call this admin drag. So it could be like, and it doesn't all need to be automated, but, like downloading, maybe an email comes in and everyone before was attaching Word files, right? Word documents. That's fine if it's one or two, but yeah, I worked on a content team where, if you had 200 writers who sent all of their files by Word, then you had to download it and then check it and then upload it to Google Drive because that's how you pass to clients. You're wasting hours a month just downloading and uploading files. So, you can just move to having everyone submit by Google Docs from the start. And that reduces the admin drag. So I think just looking for tools in general like that. Zapier is an amazing tool, plugging different APIs, plugging different, tools together that maybe even don't have an automatic integration, but you can do that, right? So someone emails you, and you have your Gmail linked up to your CRM, and it automatically adds that person. Or maybe you finish a sales call and that sales recording is uploaded to your CRM, and all of that can be integrated. So I think it's really for business owners to start thinking, what are the repetitive tasks, that a few lines of code or a tool could streamline this process and automate it for me. And I think that's the boon for business owners and digital marketers. Digital marketers specifically, I think, again, as I mentioned, it's looking at, writing a new email, writing a new blog article, writing an outline. Like, blank page is a lot harder to fix than a first draft. And same with ad creatives, right? So how do you know what ads are working? Facebook has their ad library now, which I think is amazing to look at. You can see your competitors, right? And we can reverse engineer. We can use AI tools to see what's performing well. And you can just find a tool that lets you really streamline the first iteration, whether that's an image, a blog post, an email. So find a tool that lets you get that thing done, get it good enough, and then fine tune it, right? So we'll talk on this more, but a lot of AI outputs can feel kind of bland, kind of like lifeless. They're missing details, but they do have a solid foundation that then could be personalized and worked on. So I think that's really where these tools can benefit business owners, but I don't want someone to be locked into looking like best AI tools for business. I think it's more apt to say, like, what are the automation tools out there that I can use? Because really that is, for me, another example of AI. Now, NLP. NLP is natural language processing, and basically it's a branch of AI that looks at how we can get computers and software to understand human speech or human languages, and then how can they interact in a meaningful way from those languages, right? So like, does it understand how a sentence should be constructed? Does it understand slang? Does it understand if I misspell a word, can the computer understand my intention? Now, Google's a great example of this. So I'm sure everyone's done it where they've typed in a search query, and then, Google sends back something like showing search results for this, because it understands through its NLP processes that you didn't mean to type that word, you meant to type this one. But it also always gives you the option to say show search results for blank instead. Because what if I did actually mean to spell this word and Google's just not familiar with it? So I think that's a very easy and quick example of NLP that I would say most people are familiar with. It's just finding ways that software can recognize human language and also the meaning, right? What is the meaning behind these words,
Yeah.
rather than just, okay, this word is this thing.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, a perfect example, again, for anyone that can't even think of that Google example, is text autocomplete. Based
Mm,
on what you've typed so far, Google or your phone is probably like, you know, horses are my favorite, and then it will probably guess animal or animals or other options. And again, that's a prime example of NLP. I mean, the way I kind of explain to people is it's just for the nerds, I would say it's an API. It's like an API connection between humans and computers, but that's an extremely nerdy definition. In layman's language, it's how computers understand and ascribe meaning again to what humans say, and vice versa. Um, we'll delve into this, like what this actually means and why this is important for SEOs like ourselves who specialize in optimizing for Google. But I suppose one takeaway as well that I would say is with all this talk about NLP and buzzwords, really what we're talking about is computers are actually trying to understand us, and they're not just looking at the text. They're ascribing
correct.
meaning to what we input. Therefore,
Correct.
when we write and talk about this from a Google standpoint, um, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it crystal clear to these tools who we are, what we're about, and we'll get the returns as a result. But you can explain all that. Again, just because I know all these are a lot of terms being thrown around. So NLP, how computers understand us, and then they ascribe meaning to it, so they understand what we're saying. They're like the translator. It's like the
Yep.
translation. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think we we do this naturally as humans, right? So in NLP is beyond just like the computer understanding the definition of a term. So I think the easiest one, or a very easy example, is like, right, if I train the computer on the phrase like "I love you," it understands, okay, I is the pronoun for the person, the first person speaking this. Love, it could have a dictionary definition. Love means like, okay, it's this feeling, it's this da da da, and you would be the person I'm talking to. Now that's an easy example, right? Now no one's going to say I love you to AI, but as humans, right? If I say I love you to someone, the words and their literal definition actually don't matter, because what actually matters is the symbol behind that, the meaning behind that, and the context and the connotation of what that entails, right? So if I say it to I love you to like a close guy friend, right? There's different connotation than saying it to, say, a sibling or a family member or a wife or a husband or a partner. Right, it's not just the words itself
Mm.
that we need to understand. It's the context within which those words are spoken and the associated meaning behind them.
Yeah. It's
And
contextual to
and
the
that
environment.
is exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like that is a situation that is highly personal, right? And it can be highly culturally sensitive too. So getting and Google is an amazing example of this. I think Google is an incredible tool for understanding both how language works, but also how humans work. And I mean that because like Google can take your search history. Google can take your location. It can take what you've searched previously, and then I can put in a search query, and it can return a query to me that is specific to everything I have searched before. Right? It can interpret like I'm searching for this thing, and it understands what I'm actually looking for based on who I am in its search history. Someone else who has a different search history could search the same query and get a totally different set of responses because Google is basing it based on your kind of like profile. So yeah, that to me is the even deeper layer of like what is NLP, right? And how do
Yeah.
machines understand us, right? How
Yeah.
do algorithms feed us what we want to see and know?
Yeah. Yeah. I have two things to touch off there. One of them being, again, for anybody who wants to know how does ChatGPT work, and then an obscure concept, but with in the front of artificial intelligence, it's worth mentioning it doesn't actually, like, as of right now at least, AI doesn't innately know anything in terms of like,
Mm,
it's literally, the example I would give is, I was sitting down with somebody one day, and we used again a tool that you mentioned called Dolly. And for anybody that's uninformed on that, you basically put in a prompt. I think I said people exercising in front of the Sydney Opera House with stars in the background. And what that actually does is it approximates, okay, statistically, based on my understanding of the night sky, people exercising in Sydney Opera House, here are the four most probable images that somebody would draw in this instance.
mm,
And I could say in the style of Van Gogh if I wanted to, and so on. But there's no objective truth here. It's just the AI's approximation of what that would look like. Now, the reason I'm giving the comparison between text and images, you can physically see when there's an image that you put in. It's just basically AI's guessing what that would look like. And the issue with text, and I'm sure you'll agree, and we'll get into it, is it just looks more convincing when it's written. But
sure.
realistically, if I say, I'll give the example of yoga. If I write a history of yoga, or like no, a bad example, a personal training program for somebody who suffers X, Y, and Z, it will give its approximation of what that should look like, but there's no fact
Mm,
checking. It doesn't innately know
mm,
anything. It's come
mm,
to a point like, what is the most likely output from this? And I think when we see something written or said, um, it can occasionally basically confidently bullshit. I think AI experts call it hallucinations. That's just the way I think about it. But yeah, that's one thing I wanted to touch on there. We do still need to have the fact checking element of it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Um, just a quick sort of side tangent is I think that it's important to remember that these are algorithms that people have built and coded, right? AI is not at the point where it's like coding itself, right? It's not solving its
Yeah,
own problem. Now, I'm sure there will be, and there is instances with chat and other tools where you can say like, "Hey, please read this code. Where's the error?" And it can check that.
yeah,
But
I've
the
done
AI
that. Yeah,
isn't self-improving its own code, though. At some point, I'm sure that will happen. But I think we are interacting with complex algorithms every day. My favorite is TikTok, and this will just be this example quickly why. TikTok's privacy policy is hyper invasive, right? Like
yeah,
it wants to see everything on your phone, and people just say, yeah, like take all my data, just like look at my pictures, look at my videos, take where I've been. When you sign up to TikTok, um, you can skip saying what you're interested in, but you can give the algorithm an initial input, right? So you'll say, this is my name, this is my email. Yeah, you can look at my photos, da da da. And then you can say like, okay, select three things you're into: art, music, travel, hobbies, news, da da da, entertainment. And then the algorithm starts to feed you things that it thinks you would like, right? And the algorithm is looking at your interaction with the software all the time. So, for example, maybe I love kittens. Maybe I give the algorithm no information, right? But actually, all I want to see is kittens. The algorithm's going to be watching, and now the algorithm doesn't know I like kittens. But maybe I'm watching videos and I'm skipping every video that's showing me like TikTok dances or news or cooking. But every time an animal shows up, I watch it a little bit longer, right? And then a kitten one shows up and I press the heart button, or I share it. And then the algorithm's going to start, oh, okay, he watches animal videos more often, and he really watches kitten videos. And then it's going to start throwing me more kitten videos and more kitten videos. And within three weeks, or even sometimes maybe 3-4 days, my entire TikTok is going to be kitten videos. Now, the algorithm will throw me other things once in a while. Like, you know what? He likes kitten videos. We see that many users who like kitten videos also like monkeys playing around or panda videos or, something like this. So it might throw me in the mix those videos once in a while, and it will watch how I react. Do I watch it? Do I share it? Do I like it? So it's always getting feedback, right? And TikTok's an amazing tool for this, and it's quite hilarious. There's a joke floating around Twitter, where a pastor says like, "Oh, you shouldn't be on TikTok. It's all girls in bikinis and dancing and sexy." It's like, bro, that's an algorithm. If that's what you're seeing, that's because that's what you're spending your time on, right? Like TikTok is only showing you now. This is the issue of like say echo chambers with automated processes for news feeds,
Yeah, confirmation
like
bias.
disinformation. 100%, right? But the AI is has learned to show you what you want to see, right? If you're not interacting with anything with the platform, then it doesn't show you. It doesn't know what to do. And a good example of this, and then we'll move on to something else. I'm not a big user of Twitter. I feel like I should be because everyone recommends it, but I'm not really at all. So I had Twitter on my phone for a long time. Never used it. I had an account. At first, it would send me lots of notifications. Now, I followed nobody. I think I followed Elon Musk and OpenAI. That was like the two accounts I actually followed. But I never used the platform, right? And then it would try to notify me about tweets that I might find interesting. And at first, it was just sort of like news ones, random ones. And then the notifications got less and less. But when they came, they actually got more extreme. So I would start to get like super far left and super far right, like hate speech tweets or very, very ultra liberal or ultra right wing. And it's like, man, this algorithm is doing whatever it can to try to capture my attention, right? And the less attention you pay to the algorithm, the more it wants to gravitate towards the extremes because it says like, okay, we know this will get someone to interact. So again, AI is not perfect, and that's not a value or moral judgment.
Yeah,
It's just doing what it can
it's like
to get you to
it's
interact
like
with
an
it. So
yeah, it's like a needy little kid trying to get attention. The
100%,
less
right? And,
attention
and
you
that's
give it,
that's
the
the goal,
more
right? The goal is
extremity.
get
Yeah,
users to interact with our platform, get eyes on the
yeah.
screen, get attention, and they do that by showing users either something they love or something they
Something they
hate.
hate. Yeah,
Whichever one
yeah.
gets the most emotional reaction gets users to interact. That's it. So the AI
Okay,
is amoral, but yeah, that's an interesting avenue of using how we all use AI and interact with it daily, and we just don't think about it.
okay, perfect. So we've gone through how AI works, what NLP is, common use cases of it. At the end of the day, me and you, as of now, are search engine optimization specialists. Biggest one in the world being Google. Um, how has Google responded? How has Google specifically used NLP historically? Um, and how can we basically capitalize on that? We'll talk about the implementation in a moment. As of right now, how where does Google and AI where do they intersect? How do they use NLP? We can talk about where I'm getting at with this in terms of ranking, and
Mm,
what direction do you see it going in 2023 and beyond, and how can we
mm.
capitalize on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Google is AI. Right now, there's different levels of complexity that are like publicly facing, but Google is NLP, right? Google's whole point is to understand what a user is looking for and ideally return the best results. And Google has dominated the search engine industry. It has become the default one for the majority of the Western world. Now there is other ones in other countries, like Korea has its own non-native English. Non-Western languages typically also have their own as well, but Google has dominated the industry because of exactly that. It understands what users are asking to find, and it does the best it can to deliver. And their whole business model is to just refine that process again and again and again. So, I mean, when you enter in a search query into Google, if it didn't have NLP capabilities of understanding what you're intending to find, it wouldn't return a result, or it would return a very bad result, right? And in some cases, it will say like, "Hey, we don't have any results. We don't know what you're looking for," and that could be either A, those pages don't exist, or B, Google just hasn't indexed anything around it. But I think the entire process, and this is a very simplified answer, is Google is just looking to consistently get better at showing users what they want to see. And that's it, right? And then we can see how NLP has developed over time with things like featured snippets. People also ask, right? So these are additional aspects of search engine results pages that weren't there before. So Google can understand that, okay, he's asking this question. Does he need to go to the web page to see it, or because of its capabilities, it can actually just show you the answer on the search engine result page? And then with people also ask, they can see, okay, most people who ask this question either A, then type in this query, or B, visit a page that has this information and they scroll down this far and then they move on. So all of this sort of like results page integrated answers, all of that is Google's just development of NLP. And with what you said, in terms of using NLP from a marketing standpoint or from an SEO standpoint, a big one is like, how do you capture featured snippets, right? How do you, if Google understands language in this method, go ahead.
Can you explain what those are for anybody who is uninformed as to what a featured snippet actually is?
Sure. So feature snippet is you put a query into Google, how to, or what is typically a question. How do I make drip coffee? So you put that in, and then at the top, usually at the top result, you'll have your question shown, and then a little box, and then sometimes there'll be an image to the right-hand side, and it will actually say your answer. So the steps for making drip coffee are 1 through 7, and then it lists it out, and there'll be a URL at the bottom. So this is the featured snippet. People also ask, as you scroll usually halfway down the page, sometimes they'll be at the bottom, and it will say another question that's very related. So if I search how to make drip coffee, the next one the people also ask might say, best water temperature, or, what's the water temperature for drip coffee? Or, what's the best grind for drip coffee? And then I'll press that, little arrow down, and then it will show the answer there. So this is people also ask, and feature snippets. And the way to really optimize for that, or to get that, is to write in a language, write content in a way that Google understands. So, that's the question. And on your page, you want to say, what's the best grind for drip coffee? Your answer should say something like, the best grind for drip coffee is, and then, ABC. Here's the answer. Quite short, quite concise, giving both search engines and users what they're looking for. And that's really how we interact as SEOs, with Google's algorithm, with their NLP language models.
Okay, again, so the takeaways from that are Google has basically anything that OpenAI have come up with, realistically, Google probably bet them to the chase several years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong there. That might be a bit of a jump. But the point being is Google haven't been sticking their heads in the sand. Ultimately, they have the best engineers on the planet, and they are completely AI driven. It just may not be in line with their business model. The search results, again, this is for any business owners listen to this, have progressively been kind of adjusting to include more of what we call featured snippets. And that's sort of reflective of Google's understanding that people want answers snappy and they want them fast. And it's our job as SEOs to make sure that we structure and optimize our websites in such a way that Google's understanding of what we're writing, i.e. NLP, is crystal clear. And we can capture that valuable real estate on the SERPs. SERPs being search engine results pages. And again, that translates to increased brand exposure for any online business. Say what you will, Google is by far the largest search engine on the planet. And that's my takeaway, and I'd like you to clarify, is that this is a lot of where Google's trends are going. Just really, really understanding. Not just, I'd like to rank for this keyword or this search term. I'd like to rank for this. I'll get this amount of backlinks. It's like, does Google understand what I'm talking about? Because that is what that's what it wants. It's especially with the advent of things like ChatGPT. I mean, people, once they get used to a level of personalization, they don't want to go back. So,
Sure.
I think that'd be my understanding of the takeaways from what you said. But correct me if there's anything else you'd like
No,
to add to
I
that.
think that's right. Right, like Google's not in the interest of putting a lot of its whatever it's developed. Like Chat will put things public. OpenAI will put things in public and say this is beta. Please work with it. Please try it. Right. and they're using the user's experience to self-correct. And Google's doing this as well, but we can assume that they have a lot of products in development, a lot of tools in development that's proprietary that they're not having public facing. And you can even see this in the amount of patents. Corey talks a lot about this. He goes through Google patents a lot in his work. He's a great SEO. Holistic SEO is his business. If you want to get like super into it, I highly recommend it, but it's very heady. But he walks through, like, Google has a number of patents that they've filed, but they may not be using, or maybe they did use, or they haven't implemented yet. So yeah, there's a lot there, and I think you summed it up right. Like, Google is consistently looking to deliver a more personalized results page, a more personalized experience. I don't know. I just noticed this actually last week, where I actually remember I searched for a query, and it was a random one. I got on the page, and then I got my answer and left. And then like 5 or 6 days later, that topic came up in conversation. I was like, oh, I just read about that. Hold on. So I went back and searched a similar query. It wasn't the exact one. And then the search results came. And then actually at the bottom of it showed that link I had clicked it, right? It's highlighted in a different color. So you clicked it before. But it actually said, like, you visited this page on, like, January 5th. So, like, Google's now showing you which ones you've gone to before. And I've also seen it where, like, and I can't say that this is true, but in my experience in the last 6 months, if I search for a query, let's say I'm searching around dating, right? Like, how to ask a woman out on a date, and I visit a website, and then like 2 months later, I search, how to get a woman's phone number. If that website that I visited has that information, it does seem like Google is more likely to serve me that website again if it felt that it answered my original question, right? So if I went to that website, stayed on their website, read the page, exited out, my question's been solved. So you do see how Google's adding these personalized features. So as a business owner, it's incumbent on you to make sure, like, if people come to my page, are their needs being met? And am I able to not just meet, this one need, this one question? Can I meet all the questions that they might have, in the subject, right? If you're a business owner, in their buyer's journey, what are their objections? Do I have it all on my page? So I think that's just the approach to take, right? Like, serve users the best as you can. And obviously this is simplified, but Google will reward you for doing so.
Yeah. It's kind of like what you're saying with TikTok and all that,
right.
The algorithms are hyper personalized. And I think that has been the general trajectory with the internet as a whole. I mean, originally when it first came out, people would get like static websites, and that'd be like your website for a restaurant or something like that, where people couldn't interact. As time went on, social media platforms came out, like Facebook, where people were used to interacting on actual websites. It's only natural that the search results themselves would be personalized, because that's just what we're used to. Now, going off that, there are obviously talks, and you talked about a guy, Corey Tuberg from Holistic SEO. I've been binging all of his content myself, but with this being said, there have been a lot of new search engines, and from a marketing standpoint and from a business owner standpoint, or even user standpoint, we've got new search engines like U.com, or like Bing has just announced that's going to integrate with AI. What do you think as a business owner? Should there be a change in strategy, or is it business as usual? Or do we go and take that sort of new approach that you alluded to, that Corey talks about, which he calls semantic SEO or holistic SEO? What is your stance in terms of, again, future-proofing ourselves as marketers and business owners towards the direction that you believe organic search is going with the advent of AI?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to say with the newer search engines, right? Like, what is their algorithm? How are they showing? How are they deciding on search results? So I believe it's Yep is actually Yep U is a new one, which is talking a lot about like AI based search results, and they have like an integrated AI writer in their tool, and then Yep is actually a search engine page that's being developed by Ahrefs. And their sort of marketing pitch is like site owners are going to earn money from the search results pages. And there is some variation. I actually had a conversation with Kyle Roof on one of our AMAs through his company, Internet Marketing Gold, about this. like there is some variations in terms of the results pages for the same query between Yep and Google. So why, right? Like that's the question. Now we've done a lot more testing in the SEO community on Google. Yep is still very new, so I don't think we can say one way or another like, oh, you need to do A, B, and C to rank in Yep. Now, because it's Ahrefs, like if you have your account linked to an Ahrefs account and it's getting its data from your GSC, is it more likely to rank? Who knows?
Hmm.
So I still think for business owners and SEOs, like Google's the big player in the space, right? I would never recommend someone be like, okay, I'm going to stop optimizing my page for Google and I'm going to start optimizing it on the chance that Yep is going to take
Yeah,
off. It just doesn't make
yeah.
sense, right? And at the same time, like
It's not binary either.
it's not. So I think that there's like principles that business owners and SEOs can follow that are kind of timeless. Now tactics can change, especially if you're so for anyone not familiar, there's what's known as white hat and black hat. White hat is typically things that are going to follow like what are the guidelines that a company sets. So if you're black hat SEO, you might be doing like hacked links or shady tactics, things that you could end up burning your site or a
Yeah,
client site for.
sketchy stuff.
But then there's so there's the tactics behind SEO, but then there's the principles that I think don't change, and I don't imagine those will change regardless of search engines. I do think if you or Yep starts to get more prominence, and they have things like webmaster tools like Bing does, then you should sign up for that. But we've had Bing around forever, and very few SEOs would say, hey, optimize for Bing. It's like, no, you optimize for Google and you get Bing webmaster tools, and you register for like Bing business, but all of your focus is on the main player here. So I would just say it's kind of business as usual. With that in mind, you can look at like where's Google going, where is search engines developing, and assume that they'll probably take a similar strategy across the board.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, um, realistically, very often based on the way the general public follow certain patterns, I would assume that realistically they're not going to be all completely different. If Google's following one, if people
Mm.
are showing a pattern towards liking a certain type of search, others are going to follow. So as I said, you usually are hitting multiple birds at one stone, but it
Yeah.
always makes sense to focus on the biggest player in the field, and then having an expert who lives and breathes this kind of stuff that is literally monitoring the pulse by the second, and then they can adjust on the fly as you see fit.
Mm.
Um, but I want to dive in again. So you're a business owner. You run either a software company, an e-commerce business, an attorney firm, or something like that. And you're wondering, okay, Taylor, this is all well and good, but I have a business to run. I want to know the high level stuff. I don't want to know the nitty gritty. Um, what do I do? I'm currently working with an SEO agency based in wherever. They aren't very transparent with how they work. I don't really know what's going on. Objectively, what strategy would you recommend? And again, there's always going to be the whole SEO answer of it depends, and it's going to be
Yeah.
personalized. But you, what does your strategy look like as a whole? Is it what we describe as semantic SEO? And if so, could you explain what that is? I might ask you to touch on what an entity is for anyone that's
Sure.
listening, and what should people expect from an SEO strategy that's 2023 proof and beyond?
Yeah. Well, so I think let's break that up into a couple of questions. It'll be just easier for listeners.
Yeah.
So we'll start with like you're a business owner and you're working with an SEO agency or you've hired an SEO freelancer. Uh, what should you look for, right? Like what should you expect? How do you know it's being done well? And the first one is I would say like you should never be in the dark about what they're doing. So for my clients, like when I'm working with them, they know exactly what to expect. They know what pages I'm working on. They know what topics we're creating content for. They know the kind of links we're building. So if you're in the dark, and that's not by your own choice, now maybe you're a business owner and you say, I don't want to know. Just give me a report. I think that's a bit foolish. You don't need to be an SEO expert, but if you're listening to this podcast and you're having that issue, maybe you're starting to question what's going on with my freelancer, my agency. So they should be able to tell you exactly what steps they're taking, right? Like SEO is not a secret. It's not snake oil salesman. has a very clear path to success. And to break it down, people can say, oh, it's links, it's content, and it's the technical side. But your agency or your freelancer should be able to tell you, we are doing A, B, and C. In the SEO field, I think it's foolish to promise results, right? So if your guy is saying, no, don't worry, we'll get you to position number one, like I would stay away from that, right?
Yeah.
No one can promise you like a ranking spot.
Yeah.
What they can say is, we are doing everything to give you the best chance of success, right? And that's what you're looking for. Someone who promises you, oh yeah, don't worry, we'll get you number one for this keyword, this page will be da-da-da, we'll get you 1,000 leads organic a month. It's like, man, that for me is like not a red flag, because it could be a salesman, but it is an orange flag.
Yeah.
If they're saying, this is our approach, this is what we do, these are the principles we follow, these are what we expect as outcomes, then that's the avenue to look for. So that's sort of how I would approach, your SEO agency. And if they can't tell you what they're working on, if they can't tell you their strategies, right? If they say like, oh, this is our secret, look elsewhere, right? Because like, you have SEOs who are sharing exactly what they do. Like Matt Diggity, Kyle Roof, like, Matt Diggity is an affiliate SEO, and he walks through all the steps he does within his own sites in his course or on his YouTube videos. I worked with Kyle Roof in his agency. Our clients know exactly what we were doing. My own clients know exactly month by month everything. So look for someone who's transparent and who will communicate with you. You shouldn't be in the dark. They should be able to explain, what they're doing and why they're doing it. From a high level standpoint, in future proofing, say like 2023, this is what I'm looking for. Like, links still matter, right? Unless you are really going to just be like, I'm going content heavy. I do think like the first thing you're going to need is like, are you technically sound, right? Like, is your site performing well? Is it secure? Is there redirects? Are there 404 pages that need to be addressed? So you want to make sure you have an SEO agency who can do a technical audit, and that may take up the majority of your first month, right? That should take anywhere between 2 weeks probably to the full month for the audit to be run, to be checked, for being fixed if it's done in-house with your staff or externally. And then from there, it's a strategy of like links and content. Now, there's also like interlinking, there's the fine details of that. But in terms of like, okay, what's the link strategy? You should be linking to high DR, high authority sites, but also in my opinion, you should be linking to relevant sites. And we can get into this later on of like, semantic neighborhoods, entity neighborhoods, like where does your site fit in through its linking structure to similar websites, right? So if I have a website that's about like dog care, it would be weird if I never had any links to other, like to a pet food store, or like a vet, or studies about, caring for dogs or other advice, or YouTube videos about dog care or pet care. If all my links were to housekeeping sites, now that might make sense, right? Like how to get, how to clean dog fur off your carpet. Those links can make sense. But your link strategy should make sense both to you and to search engines. And if you go to a website and the website looks terrible, ask your SEO agency, like, why am I getting links to this website, right? Why are you going here? Can we get this on a better site? Is there other options? And for content, again, there's a lot of approaches, from doing like zero search volume keywords, low competition keywords, topical authority, which we can talk about in a moment, highly relevant for a lot of people now. But is your agency building content that, one, search engines care about, but secondly, that users care about? And this is really like the big picture of SEO, and I think you said it briefly in the beginning. It's like, if someone doesn't know your brand, SEO helps them find you, right? So if I'm working for a company and the majority of their traffic is coming from branded search terms, so all their traffic comes from Google because someone searches the name.
Yeah.
So like business name review or business name hours, you're only going to get people who know your company already. And that's fine, but it's a limited customer pool.
Yeah.
Through SEO, you can start getting people who are asking questions, who have problems that you offer a solution to. So, like, how do I fix this? Or, local person for this. If you can rank for those non-branded terms, that's where your customer base expands significantly, right? And then you open up to people who have the problem you solve, but don't know you exist. And now you're educating them. You're showing them that you actually have the solution to their problem. And ideally, you're finding them in your funnel to become a potential customer. So just all SEO, all marketing should be built around that idea, right? Like, I'm looking to expand my pool of potential customers and leads by solving their problems, by informing them that I have a solution, that I can impact their life in a meaningful way, and that we're the right people to do that. So yeah, that's how I say you should approach SEO. I would stay away from like black hat stuff, like quick fixes. Anyone who promises you something like, oh, in 1 month and 2 months we're going to do this, you know, outstanding results are great, and they happen. Like, you see people who are like, their site tanked, and then I've worked with sites like this. Their site's tanked, it's getting no visitors, and then we fix everything, and a Google algorithm update happens, and they just blow up, right? And they get 10x traffic and leads because that happened. Those are great case studies, but that shouldn't be considered the norm, and people need to have that understanding, right? Like, SEO is a long-term game. You should be thinking like 6 months, 12 months. Short term, you should see results, but this is not like, it's not ads, right? Ads are plug and play. If it's working, you get results now. If it's not working, you don't get results, and your feedback loop is instant. SEO, it does take time. So that's for me the overview of 2023. And how they should go about it.
Yeah, that's you touched on something there, and I just want to make that clear to people. I suppose funny enough, what was I googling yesterday? And there's a very, very well known. I'm in Sydney, Australia at the moment. There's a very well known marketing agency over here, and they were like, "You rank first in 90 days, or your money back." And like, this is a big YouTube channel, big socials, big everything. I might share their name with you after.
If they can do it, that's awesome.
But no,
right? Like, if they have
90 days.
Go ahead.
90 days is their whole thing. And again, as you said, there are exceptions, but to make that promise at scale, I think there's one thing to remember is you're not operating on a static playing field. You're operating you're competing against other websites that are doing the exact same thing. And that's it. We talked about this. If you're a website that's just arrived and you're offering insurance, and you're like, I want to outrank top people in the space, if somebody's coming to you saying, yeah, we'll do that in 90 days, just take it with a grain of salt. If it seems too good to be true, it often is. And again, you can usually trust your gut with these kind of things. But one big thing that I would say is just, as you said, their willingness to work with the doors open, as I said, that's kind of my methodology. Any clients I work with, I send them a Google Drive folder, and I'm like, hey, everything I'm going to do is here. You can literally check in at the drop of a hat. If you're like at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, I wonder what Tomas is doing, open up and you will literally see, this is the content we're writing, these are the pages we're targeting. There's no guesswork here. It's personalized, but it's systemized as well. You talked about topical authority. What is that? Your website, why should people rank you as opposed to your competitor? Please explain, because that is an alien concept to most people, and we might talk in how AI comes into play there, perhaps the commoditization of content and all that. We can go into the weeds after that.
Yeah, so topical authority has kind of been like the buzz of 2022, I think, for a lot of people. And topical coverage they go hand in hand, right? And I think we have to thank Corey for a lot of the kind of like research and ideas around this. His case studies have been, incredible. And typically he shows, so Corey is an SEO, as I mentioned. A lot of his case studies will be around the idea of topical coverage, topical authority. He's, building sites that are getting thousands of clicks a month with like 0 backlinks and sometimes very poor technical SEO. That being said, if I remember, a lot of his case studies are typically in foreign languages, which don't invalidate them by any means. He's doing amazing work, but there is less competition in foreign SERPs. It's easier to start to win on that, usually than English SERPs. But topical authority basically means that you are the authority in your space on that subject. Now, it's easier to win in, I don't know why my internet dropped out for a second there.
All good, man. All good.
Anyways,
Topical
so
authority.
editor, if you can cut this,
I
cut
will
this.
do. Will
Yeah.
do. Cheers. Thanks, Arthur.
Topical authority. Yeah. So topical authority basically means you cover all the topics in that niche, right? And that's all the questions someone asks, all the issues. So in this example, like meeting Christian vegans for dating, it's like, where can I meet Christian vegans? Is veganism in the Bible? Was Jesus a vegan? So your content your website topical authority would mean you cover all of the questions that someone might have about that, all the topics. And that can even branch into like making sure you have what is veganism, what is Christianity, what foods are vegan. Maybe not the best example. I think you could say like kosher for Jewish people makes more sense, right? Like what restaurants are kosher
Yeah.
in New York? How do I know this is kosher? But it's a similar thing. Like small niche, people are searching for it, and that's topical authority. Like you cover everything, and then some, right? So it's not just using like keyword research tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush to find the topics that already exist. It's also about creating content that doesn't exist, but that should be there. So you can look.
Okay.
This is you make sure you cover zero search volume keywords, but if you or the client is the expert in this industry,
What's the zero
then you
search volume
likely
keyword?
yeah. So it's a keyword. It's a keyword that just doesn't have. Typically, you would see in like Ahrefs that there's no search volume. It would say that it's a zero. Keyword. Nobody's searching this per month. But if you search it on Google, you will find results, right? And if it comes back from Ahrefs, it does mean people are searching it. Now, it may not be thousands, but there is someone searching it. And the idea with zero search volume or low competition keywords is that typically they are easier keywords for a site to win, right? So if I'm searching, car insurance Canada, and I have a new website, I can't win that. But if I offer insurance that's very specific, like car insurance for single moms in Alberta, someone might be searching that, and I can make a page about that, specifically about that topic, about that keyword, and I might be able to win it. So it's lower competition, lower search volume, but there is techniques about you target these low search volume terms first to naturally build what would be your authority. So you build authority on low search volume, low competition topics, and then over time you can go after the higher competition topics, higher search volume topics, and at a certain point, you've basically achieved topical authority because Google trusts you for all of the topics in a space, all of the keywords in a space. It sees you as the expert. It sees that, okay, this person is the go-to for this subject. So to me, that's topical authority. And it's a popular strategy right now for many people, both from affiliate sites and client sites.
Okay. It sounds to me like a lot of content. I suppose that's exactly where tools like
For sure.
ChatGPT can be used to sort of accelerate that process. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. That makes complete sense. Now, going off that, so say, for example, several things. I'd be curious to hear some of your own personal strategies if you're willing to share them. With regards to how you find these low search volume keywords that, again, I mean, the way I explain to clients is we're stacking up loads of little wins. It's like building a pyramid, load of little keywords, stacking them up. There's a certain strategy that you use called the avalanche strategy, which I'd like you to clarify on, if that's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, how you structure this, how you prioritize, because if we're going to go as granular as possible with all of these questions, like nesting queries that people have on top of each other, where do you start? Because I mean, you could hypothetically, I'd imagine, end up with thousands of terms around a topic. For example, if you're for a niche topic, but also for a broader one, um, we have a finite amount of resources, whether we're using AI or not. How do you like to prioritize your strategy around this?
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. So, a couple things. First is if you're a niche website, you're probably just talking about one thing, right? It could be like pet beds for cats. So that's your only topic, which means you have a very limited range of content you need to write, which is going to be everything around pet beds for cats, how to choose one, what to look for, the pricing, best reviews, right? This is an affiliate example that doesn't exist, but yeah. If you're broader, so let's say insurance, your website actually has multiple topics. So that could be car insurance, motorcycle insurance, liability insurance, home insurance, luxury items or valuables insurance, and then even different types: flood insurance, fire insurance, theft, liability. All of these are unique topics for your site. Now, as we mentioned, the SEO is an ongoing process, right? It's not a one-time thing. And I would never try to convince someone that they need to do SEO if they don't already understand the value of it. If they understand the value of it, then I don't need to convince them, and that's the ideal situation. Once they see how it works and why they could invest in this and why it could be beneficial for the business, what I would then do is I would look to see where are the majority of their leads coming from, right? And this is the conversation to have with the client. If your SEO just comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm going to do your SEO," and they don't ask you any questions, that's a concern, right? So if you're an insurance agency, who are the majority of your customers? Typically, they are clustered, right? Like maybe you really don't get anyone from motorcycles, but maybe you get tons of moms, right? Or maybe you're prioritizing internally, and marketing for ads is around like auto insurance for families, or for like family vehicles, or maybe you do off-road vehicles, something like this. So whoever the majority of your clients are, your leads are, this is where I would start from the SEO standpoint, right? Because your page is already structured around this, your marketing positioning already fits this. At that point, I would say this is the SEO topic I would start with, and then you'd basically break it down by popularity. So that's number one, number two, number three, number four. And so you'd cover everything in time, but you would fill all the content first within that topic. So you don't need to become the authority on insurance right away. What you become the authority on initially is the subject that gets you the most leads, that's the most profitable to your business. And that being said, now Kyle Roof's avalanche theory is based off of a blog post from a website called Builder Society. I highly recommend reading it. You can just search Builder Society avalanche theory, and it breaks it down there. Now, Kyle's made some improvements, some changes from one to the other, but it's essentially the same thing. And that ties in with Corey's ideas of topical authority really well, because essentially you're building content in that subject, right? In that topic. That being said, you don't just build low competition keyword content, right? Like you do need your main page, right? So if you're selling family car insurance, you have a main page about that. And you should have content pages
Okay.
that you don't expect to win, but that your users expect on the page, right? Like you should have all the information that a user landing on your page would want to see, and that search engines would want to see, because even if you're not getting positions 1, 2, and 3 for that page, it'd still be weird not to have it, right? Like if I have all these low competition, long tail keywords, which are, minivan insurance for single moms in Alberta, but then they come to my website and I don't have a, article about why you should have car insurance or the different types of car insurance, because I don't think I can win it. Like that's a one for search engines and
Yeah.
also for users. That's like, why isn't that
It's
there?
weird.
So you still want to make sure you have all of your main
Yeah.
category, main topic pages. You're just not expecting to win those
Mm-hmm.
organically. So you have those built, right? You start
Yeah.
there, and then you're starting to look at low competition pages, which, not to get into the nitty gritty, but essentially avalanche theory, the idea is that there's a correlation between the amount of traffic your site gets on a daily visitors to the amount of search volume a keyword gets over a month, right? And Google has an inherent trust level for that. So if I have a brand new site, and this is a very simplified explanation, if I have a brand new site and I'm getting, say, 10 visitors a day, and there's a keyword that's getting a search volume of, say, like 10 to 100 people search that a day, I might be able to build an article around that exact keyword and expect that I can, optimize that article using a tool like Pop or Surfer, and I can win somewhere between positions 1
Yeah.
and 3, or at least on the first page, relatively quickly. I publish and I'm good, right? So there's a correlation between how much Google trusts me and the search volume of that keyword. Now, with the same example, if I have a brand new site
Excuse me.
and go ahead.
Sorry, My question was, is that monthly search volume for that keyword or daily search volume for that
Yes,
keyword? Is it
monthly
daily
search
website
volume.
traffic versus monthly search volume? Monthly. Okay.
Yes, you can also use impressions. This is something they experimented with in the
Yeah.
agency, is using impressions over clicks. Impressions over clicks for the site.
Mm.
So yeah, and that's for this also for like keywords, right? Getting that measured down. But if there's a search volume for protein powder, right? It's like thousands, probably millions of people search that a day, and I have a brand new website. There's no way Google can trust me enough to provide information around protein powder. So I have to go more detailed, more long tail, more low volume, low competition keywords. And then avalanche theory is essentially the idea that you just build that up over time. So as Google sends you, say 5 or 6 people a day for that low volume search, and then it sees people are happy with it, then you can build the next tier, next tier, next tier. You slowly just level up your keywords and the amount of
It's like
search
the
volume that
stairs.
they get over time. Yeah, it's all just like steps, right, till you're finally at the top. And this is a approach you can take
Hmm.
without building backlinks. Essentially, it's building a natural authority through content. And you could say like through semantic, basically building like a semantic library for search engines that you cover all the topics semantically that are related to your industry. Whereas backlinks do provide authority, but they are in some sense like artificial, right? Because the majority of SEOs now purchase links from each other rather than build content around that subject. So that's topical authority and how it really combines with Kyle Roof's avalanche strategy. And I think they actually go hand in hand really well.
Yeah, that's honestly like an invaluable insight. So if I was to summarize my takeaways from what you just said, that avalanche theory and building topical authority using Corey's sort of methodologies aren't exclusive from each other. However, what you
No.
do is you create a topical map. Topical map is basically anything and everything you can write about that topic and
Mm.
roughly prioritized. And then
Yeah.
what you do is you build the non-negotiable fundamental pages that just need to be on a website.
Yeah.
Taylor, those generally be landing pages on the website or blog posts, or is it a bit of a case by case basis?
I think it's a case by case, right? And so like, um, yeah, if you're in
Yeah,
skincare, right, you offer Botox, like you need to have a page around like the benefits of Botox. That's a blog post. But you probably have a landing page, like who we are, why we offer Botox, why you
yeah,
should pick us, why you should go for us, how to schedule an appointment. So I would say it's
yeah.
usually a combination of both, and you'll
Okay,
know based on what your competitors are doing. Right. So always see who's ranking well. If they have a post, you make a post. If it's a landing page, make a landing page. And that's just the general process.
great. Yeah. Okay, so then what we do is, so you're a website owner, you're doing this whole strategy. You check the competitors, and your SEO checks the competitors, sees what kind of pages that they have. They use a term, they optimize those using Surfer, SEO, or Pop, and
Mm.
then all of a sudden they've got these hundreds of thousands of topic ideas, and then given that you as an agency owner, you're getting say 100 visitors per day or impressions per day, what your SEO should then do now that you've got your pillar pages, your core pages, um, you should basically be targeting around keywords that have less than 100 searches per month or up to 100 per month until you've bled that dry in one specific vertical, and then you tier up as you bleed them dry, and then you go cluster by cluster, prioritizing the clusters or silos, content silos, prioritizing the topics that have the most potential to generate revenue for the business. In the example of Botox,
Yeah.
your SEO agency provider, or this is what I do. Well, not that I work with Botox people, but with my e-commerce clients, I would check Google Analytics and I would see which products or services are most profitable, and then we take that into consideration because they should be taking a revenue based approach. Would you agree with that
Yeah.
summary, or is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that's right. That just the only caveat I would say is like you don't need. I mean, that is the approach if you're doing pure avalanche theory. But links are still relevant, and like I would rarely spend the entire budget a client had just on starting low competition keywords. I would still cover that, but I would also be actively building links because that I don't want to say it artificially inflates your authority, but in some sense it does, right? So maybe for months 1 through 3, we are just doing content because we want that baseline there. So that I have places to send backlinks to. I have pages that are relevant. Um, but I would say, like, backlinking should be a part of any SEO strategy. And ideally, you're sending backlinks either directly to your most important pages, or to, if you're a bit dodgy on your backlinks, to a page that then links internally to your important pages. So I think that both our backlinks and content actually go hand in hand. And having those backlinks can allow you to sort of jump up to higher tiers more quickly. Albeit with a client has a limited budget, or as a business owner you have a smaller budget, you do want to allocate some of that money towards links, because this can essentially artificially inflate your authority level, allowing you to go after higher volume keywords. Now, what that might mean is, maybe you're building a few links a month, and instead of having to go after keywords that have a search volume of like 0 to 5, or sorry, 0 to 10, or 10 to 100, now you can do keywords with a monthly search volume of 100 to 500. And so that's just one process where actually I think like link building and content building go hand in hand. And you can find quality link providers, people who have like real relationships with real websites, with site owners, and you'll pay more for that for sure. But what's the cost of one link? Maybe you're paying $150, $200. Maybe you want a really high DR one, that maybe costs you $400 for that one-time placement, but that could be offset by, say, if you're just getting 10 more leads a month, and the lifetime value of one customer is thousands of dollars, or even just one purchase is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I do think that link building and content go hand in hand, and
Yeah.
they should be a part of any SEO strategy.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. In terms then on the
Yeah.
link building side of things, because I think that is what intimidates most people, definitely, because it's a bit of a black box, and there's so many different avenues through which people get links. How would you recommend that business owners, again, or SEOs in general, prioritize? At what point do you recommend starting to build backlinks? Do you wait for a page to get traffic before you build a backlink to it? Do you like to build them directly towards the money pages, quote unquote, as in the pages that we ultimately want to rank? Or do you like to funnel them through blog posts? What does that look like for you?
Um, so again, I hate to say like it depends, but it depends. A lot of that depends on the quality of the backlink that you can get, right? So if let's say you've built an amazing piece of content, it makes more sense typically for people to link externally to blog posts or content pages. Like a lot of people don't have a reason to link to your money page or your home page. Sometimes they do. Money pages, like service pages, it can make sense within the context of, say, if a guest post listed like 5 best Botox providers in you're in Sydney, right?
Yeah.
So 5 best Botox service providers in Sydney. Now you might not write that post because right your competitors are on that page, but if that page exists, you might be able to get on that list, and then that makes sense to link to your service page, or 5 best skincare clinics in Sydney. Then your homepage link exists. But if you can always link to a blog post. So benefits of Botox could live on another website, and you can say like you cite that post on your site through a guest post. So I think it's kind of like either or, both and. You can link to home pages, you can link to money pages, you can link to blog posts. It just depends on what's the relevancy of the article on the other website. Like, where does it make sense to link, and also how safe is that website, right? Like if you got a post on the New York Times, link to your homepage, link to your money page, link to whatever
Yeah.
page you need it.
Yeah.
But if you got a post on, say, like or a mommy bloggers, like a legit website, like so maybe I don't know, like uh 50 and Fiery, I think that's the website around skincare for older women. Like, she's a legit blogger, right? It's not the most fancy site, but if you got a link from her, it's a real website. If you got a link from maybe a site that seems a bit more dodgy, that covers everything, and you're like, okay, this is maybe a PBN, maybe not a
Yeah.
PBN, a private blog network, then I would link to a blog post that then links to say your money page.
Okay.
That's the approach I would take. As far as when to do backlinks, uh, you know, it makes more sense when you have a decent amount of content
Yeah.
on the site, right? Like, your site should be built. It doesn't need to have a huge blog section, but if you have a website with a homepage and one service page, like, you don't need to be building links. You need the rest of your site built out. You need some content that makes sense to link to.
Yeah.
It should look natural. I mean, I wouldn't just say like, oh, you've built no links, let's build 100.
Yeah.
We can ramp up the volume over time,
Yeah.
right? Like, as you see, your traffic increasing, you can get more links, and you can always do competitor analysis. And to be honest, as you said, it's a bit of a black box. In this day and age, that is something that I would just outsource.
Hmm.
To be honest, find a quality link provider. You could use like Get Me Links. I know they have all like relationships with their providers, so their guest posts are all actual websites. They're not PBNs. There's also Authority Builders. So both of these are reputable quality
Hmm.
link building agencies who this is all they do.
Okay.
Right. And so as the business owner, outsource to someone like that. Stay away from Fiverr.
Yeah.
If your agency that you hire doesn't specialize in links, I wouldn't say like you don't need to have them do it, but I would ask more questions like how are you getting the links? Where are
Yeah.
they coming from? And they may be reselling you links through one of the two providers I've mentioned, which it's totally kosher.
Yeah.
But it is good just to be aware where you're getting those links from and how they're impacting your site.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, a big thing for me is what is the quality assurance process like for these backlinks?
Mm,
Ultimately,
yeah,
you as a business owner or somebody who just doesn't nerd out about search engines, you're not going to have the time. It's not worth your while trying to analyze, is this website safe? Is it relevant? Does it carry
correct.
the specific? Because it is a massive time consuming thing. Um,
Yeah.
Perhaps on the topic of AI, maybe that is something that can be automated. Actually, now thinking about it out loud, that's a SaaS idea for somebody to check the
Mm.
metrics against certain things and automatically. Actually, I forget that I said that on video now, because someone's going to steal that idea now and automate the quality assurance process of backlinks. So don't steal that. That was Tomas O'Dwyer's idea on the 11th of January 2023, for the record. But going back to the SEO, because I'm conscious of the time, but going back into the AI side of things, I want to bring back to two terms that you mentioned before. Or one you mentioned and one that I'd like to ask your thoughts on. Three things actually, three SEO specific questions, and then we can see where we are then. But one was, you talked about the idea of a semantic playground earlier on. Um, that's a term that a lot of people aren't familiar with. What does a semantic playground mean? Is it tied to this term entity that I use quite often? Again, these are rhetorical questions. Um, what does it mean for SEO? I've heard it being said, a lot of these are rhetorical questions, but do you believe that it is important for an SEO to look at elements other than a business's website, like indicators from like Wikipedia or socials and so on? Like, what is a semantic playground, and why is it important for 2023 and beyond for people in the marketing space?
Mm. Yeah. So I think as search engines start to pull, without going too deep into it, there's the idea of semantic SEO, which means search engines are looking for the meaning of things rather than necessarily the specific keywords. And that can be a whole other conversation for the future of one versus the other.
Yeah.
But essentially, like an entity. Okay, so in semantics, an entity is an identifiable individual thing. All right, so you could say a dog is an entity, but like Taylor's dog is a more specific entity, and Taylor's dog named Fido is a unique individual entity that has associations. Like dog, I don't have a lot of association with dog, but Fido is Taylor's dog. That's an entity. Those are two entities, and the relationship between them is owner pet, right? So semantic SEO is a lot of looking at entities and the relationships between them, how they interact with each other, and also maybe how are they linked to entities on other websites. Does your website mention websites that are semantically related? So again, I have a website about dogs. I might expect that I have some links about vets or like food vendors or like YouTube videos about pets. So these are all different aspects of building a semantic entity or building an entity in and of itself, right? Like what is your entity? Where does it fit? What is it about? What does it cover? What does it not cover? Which is just as important, right? So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the circle around what your business is? If you do SEO and all you do is SEO, right? That circle, that box should not include Google ads, and it should be clear to search engines that you shouldn't be in the results for like Google ad providers. That wouldn't make sense. So that's the idea of building, like having an entity. In that, I do think we need to start looking at marketing more holistically, right? So typically we treat like Facebook ads as one thing, social as one thing, like you could say like Wikipedia entries as something else. But there's no reason that they can't be integrated and that they shouldn't be part of each other, right? So social signals do seem to be some minor influencing factor on ranks, but that may be increased in the future. Does having a Wikipedia article about your site influence your level of ranking in Google? I don't know. I can't say for sure whether it does or not, but I can tell you that users definitely would be impressed if there's a Wikipedia article, right? Like that does validate the reality that that business or that product or that person is somewhat significant, because not everyone can get a Wikipedia article. Um, so yeah, I do think SEOs should be considering the more holistic viewpoint, and
Hmm.
they should be having conversations with the rest of the marketing team. Like, what are their initiatives? Where do they want to go? Right? Are we launching a new campaign around this product or this service, and how does that look across all of our marketing verticals? Like, what's the social team doing? What's the paid team doing? What's the SEO team going to do? So yeah, that I think that's just a quick gist, but I do think that all of it matters, and it should be a cohesive process between all the different avenues.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the way I personally view this with my relationship with my clients is, again, it's all about fleshing out that digital ecosystem. Google just happens to be one of the mediums.
Mm,
Again, I think as we're moving towards, realistically, we alluded to this when we nerded out about AI, but our machines are trying to understand us as much, at least as much as we're trying to understand them. And it's just basically, in the case of SEO, it's like we are specialists in making sure that Google understands who we are as well as possible. Because the more
yeah,
information we give it, if Google has the option between your dog website versus competitors, and it knows exactly who you are, the code's laid out, the text is laid out. There's all these signals from different sources from different websites. It's going to that is going to pay off dividends. And one thing I would say is, with the advent of new search engines, we kind of have to assume that it's based in similar tech. Ultimately, these AI concepts that we're discussing, like entities, natural language processing, and all that, it's the same tech, just different expressions. So my personal stance on this as of right now is, at the end of the day, if you're a business and you've tackled every single topic, you're clearly an expert in your space. You've got the code is completely in order. You've got referrals from really really high quality websites. There's Wikipedia articles. There's an insane amount of social proof. I don't care what the search engine is. Your business is going to come out on top. And again, it is one of those
yeah,
things that compounds over time. And as a business owner that's investing in this type of work, your customer acquisition cost will decrease
yeah,
as time goes on. Your ROI just does increase. Again, it's all about specializing and making sure that you're communicating with people that are 100% focused on where things are going. You're trying to plan. You're it's like when someone's playing soccer, which I don't do, but like you're passing where the person's going to be, not where they are right now. And that's, I think,
sure.
the important thing. Um, One last SEO question before we wrap up, because I'm aware it's been going on for the guts 2 hours. Is Lastly, the I've heard you talk about this multiple times. The about the use case of GPT-3 assisted content like ChatGPT or
Mhm.
Jasper or so on. Soon GPT-4, which will be potentially 500 times as powerful. But Google will obviously do what it takes to compensate for this. There is going to be dilution of content, and mm, realistically, I think a lot of people are looking around thinking, what will Google use to distinguish who is the true expert and who is not? For example, I could throw a prompt into AI and say, write me a video about X, Y, or Z. I could have no idea
Mm.
what I'm talking about, but at first glance, it can be enough to convince the layman. What is your stance on the concept of authorship? I know Corey talks about it a lot. And do you view that as a potential ranking factor, especially in the more competitive niches that are related to health and wellness or else finance? And if so, could you explain what that means? Because I think it's an important thing for people to consider if their stance is, I'm just going to blast the internet with a load of AI content and it's not going to bite me in the ass.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've had this conversation a lot. with Kyle Roof as well in different ways in Corey. So Corey has a really good paper out there about Google authorship, and Google's pushing what they call EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. So one way we can do this, Google test this, is to see who is writing these articles, right? So a lot of people now in the SEO space recommend if you create content, you have an author bio, right? So who is this person? What are they writing in? A lot of SEOs think that right now Google's not testing for authors, but with the advent of AI, it does and now this is just my personal stance. It does make sense to start building individuals as their own semantic entity, not in every niche, right? So not in dogs, but financial advisors, like doctors, health, right? So if the doctor has a website and he just has AI doing all the outputs, can we trust it? I mean, right? Maybe for basic things like what is vitamin C. But I do think if you're giving financial advice and you want to incorporate AI, you can, or any sort of like what we call your money, your life niche, you can use it, but treat it as a first draft, get the baseline down, and then start putting in things that only you as an expert would know, or that only your client would know, right? And that will require a bit of a back and forth. From say agencies, SEO agencies who may not specialize in healthcare. So their writers kind of write about everything, and ones who only specialize in this small micro niche, right? We only do SEO for accountants. All of our writers are ex-accountants or financial backgrounds. Or you may need your doctor to actually write a little bit. So what this means is like Google does have a patent for looking at who their authors are, and where their authors are published elsewhere, right? So like if you're a doctor, you typically publish research papers, or you might have, and those can be found online. You might have a LinkedIn bio and a Facebook page, and all of those can be combined to build a unique entity in the eyes of search engines of this person. And from the AI content standpoint, humans, when AI writes, and I believe that I just came across this recently. They did a test where they did like a bunch of emails. That some were AI written, some were people written, and the AI ones people thought they were okay, but they thought they would lack any personality or uniqueness, and that's really the issue with AI tools at the moment. They're getting better for sure, and I think that will change over time. There's something out there. I think like characters.io, where basically you can have Chat GPT respond to you in as a specific person. So like Alex Hormozy or Oprah or these people, the response will be in their voice. But yeah, one thing Google could do is basically start seeing like what are the semantic patterns that an individual uses, and is that pattern consistent across all the content that's attributed to them? And ideally it should be, right? Like I speak in a certain way. I have a unique cadence. I have words I like to use, patterns I follow. Maybe it's not picked up right away from like one podcast, but if you watch all of my content, you probably would see that similarity. And the AI could pick that up both verbally and from text that is created, written content. So yeah, I think that's one avenue to go down. And I think looking forward, if you're not in a your money, your life niche, I probably wouldn't make this like a high priority thing to think about. But if you are, or you are attributing content, to like the owner of a business, you may want the owner to, have some input to adjust for that going forward. That's also like, let's wait and see, right? That's theorizing of what might be, but we don't have any proof that that's actually happening for the time being.
Yeah. That definitely makes a lot of sense to me. Effectively, I suppose what we're doubling down on is really the whole concept of entities and nesting things. It's not only are we trying to build out that ecosystem for the business, we're also trying to build out the ecosystem for the experts themselves.
Hmm.
So that, for example, if Taylor Kimball is to write about, if you hypothetically were an expert in, I don't know, back pain, if you had a history of writing about back pain from writing research papers and so on, it would make sense that that would carry more merit than somebody else who potentially didn't have that track record. So
Sure.
maybe you disagree. There is an argument to be made that in the upcoming years in 2023, 24, 25, 26, and so on, not only will the SEO's job be to actually provide work for the back pain company that you work for, but also to actually flesh things out for you. So we're really layering on top this whole concept of of building out that ecosystem that we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think again, like a lot of what we're doing with AI, we already do naturally as humans. My quote unquote focus is on page SEO and AI SEO, and so you have me on this podcast to talk about that, right? IMG has a course of mine about that. I have already started to build that authority, that expertise in that industry, and so I have talks about that, right? Matt Diggity talks about affiliate SEO. Kyle Roof talks about on-page SEO. We already have our areas of expertise that naturally humans want to go to, right? If you again, I don't know, I have back pain, but I don't know anything about it, so no one's going to have me on a conference call to talk about back pain. So yeah, we already do this as humans, and I think it's a natural progression for search engines as well. Did we like I'm on podcasts, Kyle Roof's on podcasts, Matt Diggity's on podcasts to talk about things that we already know about. So AI, in my case, Kyle Roof is on-page SEO, Matt Diggity's affiliate SEO and marketing, right? So humans already naturally gravitate towards experts, and it makes sense that search engines would look for the same thing, or like websites would want to deliver content from the same people. So we mentioned this in before. It's learning and replicating, right? Like, is AI making something original, or is it just finding new connections? So you wouldn't have me on a podcast about back pain, even if I have it. I'm not a doctor to talk about it. So I do think that it does seem
Yeah,
like a natural development for search engines to go this route. It doesn't mean they will, but it does make sense. Like that is a natural way to think about how things would develop, because we do this already when we seek out information.
yeah, it makes perfect sense. And again, it's, I suppose, for anybody listening here, this again does harp on that whole point that we made. There's a reason, as we said, that the people behind DeepMind are using games as simulations for real life. Again, that's very, very often what these artificial intelligence systems are doing. They're just trying to find what we do in real life innately and replicating them,
Yeah.
and vice versa. If you want to get good at SEO, learn how to think like a machine, and if you want to figure out what
Yeah.
way AI is going, very often it's going to try and replicate, as you said, what's second nature to us, because as humans, often we assume that
Mm-hmm.
the best way of figuring out our problems are by getting something to think the exact same way as us. So I have one last question for you, Taylor, if that's okay for you before we sign off
Yeah.
for the day. It's more of a personal one. What do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned in, you can say about SEO, but more so in business and I suppose business slash life in the past year? What are the biggest takeaways and lessons that you learned that you feel might be valuable for others based on your own sort of trials and tribulations?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Let's see. Um, I mean, so from a business standpoint, and it's probably like personal as well, and it's cliche to say like put yourself in a community, but that's really like putting yourself in a community with people who are going the direction you want to go, and ideally a few steps ahead of you. And then also people who are just starting, and build those relationships, right? Like you're so much of my success, so much of like where I am today is because of like my close friends, the people that I know, and yeah, like that is beyond anything else, right? So go to conferences, like network, and I'm quite an introvert. I really don't like the idea of like networking, but you can build.
Last question
All right.
is about biggest
Uh,
lesson community.
yeah. So yeah, we got cut out. Hopefully this is edited. Okay. So yeah, the biggest thing you can do is just like focus on building your community and get involved with one, like whether that's online or in person. Develop close relationships, find accountability. And I think it can be intimidating, especially if you know people who are like significantly more successful than you or significantly more advanced in an industry. Like I'm still relatively new to SEO, and here I am friends with people who are been doing it for years. But don't think that the only value you can provide is from a business standpoint, right? So like I may not be able. I'm not going to give Matt Diggity any information around SEO, but he has asked me questions around like AI, because I've spent more time focusing on that, and he's more on the business side and affiliate side. So you can find your niches, you can find your specializations, and build that community. And I think that's the biggest one, both like personally and from business. And I think the other thing too is we figure out how to build digital assets that leverage you, right? So we talked about this in AI. Like AI is the finding intersections that are unique to you. Um, you know, I can make a video, I can make a podcast, and then it's done, and it brings me clients forever. A website's the same thing, right? It's a digital asset that works for you. And I think anyone in the marketing standpoint, even business owners, need to think in that way, right? Not everyone needs to be a YouTube star, not everyone needs to be a blogger, but just having even a few pieces of digital real estate that live out there that can serve you. If someone asks a question, you can send them to a video explanation, so you're not doing the same thing again and again. It's just thinking like, how can I automate my processes in life? Like, for example, this isn't digital, but I have a cleaner who takes care of my like house cleaning and my laundry, and I just don't think about it, right? And it's weight off my chest. I have a personal assistant who manages so much of my life, from flights to hotels, and people think like, oh, I can't believe you have that, a personal assistant, but like, why wouldn't I? Right? Like, my time is limited. If I can pay someone to manage those things and I can focus on what really matters to me, why wouldn't you do that? So, whether it's AI tools, hiring help, outsourcing, just free up your time so you can spend it on the things that truly matter to you, whether that's business or friends or your personal life or hobbies. And I think those are two of my biggest takeaways for 2022.
Honestly, Taylor, it's been unbelievable. I don't know about you, but this is like, if this was a podcast that I was listening to, this is would definitely be the most insightful that I've come across on the topic. Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, really appreciate the conversation. Um, I think I've learned a lot myself about AI here, and it's good to see we're seeing eye to eye in terms of where things are going. I'm personally going
Yeah.
to continue to have these conversations with other experts in the field with upcoming weeks and months. But again, just want to say, man, not only as a friend, as somebody I respect in the community, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this call and share some of the insights you've had over the past while.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, and let's do it again when there's more to talk about.
100%, man. And where can people find you before we go?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, just my normal name, Taylor Kimball, or you can find me on my agency website. That's TerraSurf, so TerAsurf.co. And you can also find I have a course actually about AI, using AI and SEO. That's on the platform Internet Marketing Gold. That's Kyle Roof's SEO and marketing educational platform. So yeah, those are the three locations. Reach out to me, LinkedIn, my website, or on IMG if you're a member, and happy to talk with you.
Okay. Listen, man, all the best.
Uh,
Appreciate it. And to anybody listening, until next time, make sure to like, subscribe,
Bye.
all that fun